Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This year marks the 150th anniversary of the discovery of Leprosy Bacillus by Dr. Hansen. To mark this historic anniversary, Sasakawa Leprosy Initiative and the University of Bergen in Norway are organizing the Bergen International Conference on Hansen disease, 150 years since the discovery of the leprosy bacillus, next week on June 21 and 22nd. Today, we will look at what the 150th anniversary means for the specialist and also the person affected by leprosy from a social perspective. So let's start the program. I now invite Dr. Alice Cruz, UN Special Rapporteur on the elimination of the discrimination against persons affected by leprosy and their family members, on what meaning does 150 years anniversary hold for the Special Rapporteur. We got a video message from her.
In 1873, Gerhard Hansen, a Norwegian doctor, pursued the invisible truth about what was then described as an aristocratic disease and unsuitable for idle minds, since it stubbornly concealed its secrets and resisted the inquiring gaze of science. Hansen inquired the natural origin of an ancient disease historically classified within the Judeo-Christian ambivalence that represented leprosy either as the consequence of divine punishment or as an opportunity for the redemption of those who were compassionate towards people with leprosy. Hansen broke with centuries of controversy between different explanatory models for leprosy. After all, leprosy was not caused by a divine agency, nor by a promiscuous sexuality, but by a mycobacterium that Hansen named lepre. Hansen inaugurated the modern history of leprosy, and leprosy was thus medicalized. Medicalization processes mean that problems previously classified and managed as moral, religious, or criminal are redefined as a disorder and addressed by biomedical technologies. Leprosy was no longer the subject of morality but of modern science. And although this was a giant step for humanity, the medicalization of leprosy was not complete. To some degree, the biomedical explanatory model about leprosy absorbed non-scientific views about the disease. Let me give you the context. Science is never neutral or context independent as it claims. In the years immediately after Hansen's discovery, the disease caused by the now known Mycobacterium leprae was described in Europe as the most painful disease that had ever reached humanity, looming in European nations as a imperial danger coming from the territories under colonial domination. The mission of modern medicine was to get the civilized world rid of such scourge. And thus, persons with leprosy were seen as individuals who carried in their bodies a disease that had no place in modern nations. This fear of leprosy by the Western world, which some even called leprophobia, explains both the political and transnational nature of the first international conference on leprosy. It is important to mention that since the beginning of the modern history of leprosy, leprosy was addressed as a transnational matter, as the recommendations sent to the newly created League of Nations in 1924 urging it to take leadership in prohibiting persons affected by leprosy from entering European countries shows. At the conference, two main ideas were endorsed: the theory of contagion and the need for a prophylaxis that segregated the sick from the healthy. The sick individual was seen as the vector of a terrible disease, and all the power and violence of the state fell upon those who had done nothing but being infected with the bacillus. Thousands of leprosarios were established throughout the world after the late 19th century. Segregation denied the civil and political rights of persons affected by leprosy, who were separated from their families and communities, often at a very early age. The same policy was applied in 1923 to healthy children of persons affected by leprosy. Make no mistake, there was never any scientific evidence to support the prophylactic segregation of persons affected by leprosy. Since the bacillus could not be cultivated, there was no evidence whatsoever on how the disease was transmitted. There were only old stereotypes to which modern science resorted to, and with that, biomedicine turned harmful stereotypes into lawful truths. Nevertheless, such a policy was widespread. It reinvented leprosy in modern times as a dreadful disease, disseminating stigma in many parts of the world. Much of the current discriminatory national legislation was produced during this period. And this was the founding era of the modern history of leprosy. This idea that the interruption of transmission is so important as to prevail over the rights of individuals, and that a merely biomedical approach that targets the individual body as the locus and vector of the disease is sufficient. Let us now look at what happened next. The second period of the modern history of leprosy began with the discovery in 1943 of a drug with some reasonable degree of efficacy in curing leprosy. The efficacy of dapsone in curing leprosy led to a transition from a policy of compulsory segregation to a policy of decentralization to general healthcare services. It was in this period that the first calls emerged from leprosy colonies demanding the recognition of dignity and rights for persons affected by leprosy. Significantly, the voices of these pioneers had to wait more than a half a century to be heard. And you may ask whether the second period of the modern history of leprosy brought with itself what Thomas Kuhn called a scientific revolution, meaning those episodes of non-cumulative development in which an older paradigm is totally or partially replaced by a new one, which is incompatible with the previous one. While apparently the response might be yes, I would say that no, there was no scientific revolution, because the same biopolitical paradigm that described leprosy as a disease with no place in modern worlds remained intact. But I should mention that there was a moment in which a controversy that might have changed the future arose. At the 17th International Congress of Leprosy, held in Tokyo in 1959, two approaches to tackle leprosy were put forward. One that emphasized the importance of mass drug administration, and another that recognized the importance of environmental factors in the incidence and prevalence of leprosy. The first approach won, and the public health strategy endorsed by the conference was based on what BL called the pharmaceuticalization of public health, and that usually implies a focus on drugs distribution under a political commitment to eliminate a particular disease. The social determinants of leprosy, that is, the fact that those affected had no access to basic needs and fundamental rights, remain unaddressed under such approach. The third period of the modern history of leprosy began with Shepard's findings on a technique that allowed for growing Mycobacterium leprae in vivo. This technique proved the primary resistance to dapsone, and in 1981 a group of experts from WHO developed a multi-drug regime. From 1986 onwards, great efforts were made to expand the delivery of multi-drug therapy. This was the golden era of the fight against leprosy. I have visited countries where many people still remember how during this period they had resources to go into remote areas and communities and actively find new cases of leprosy, which resources nowadays they lack. In May 2001, WHO announced the global elimination of leprosy as a public health problem. However, despite such impressive results on the prevalence of leprosy, trends regarding incidence did not follow as expected, and stigmatization and discrimination on the grounds of leprosy endured. And this is why history is important. As Wallerstein said about another matter, if we look at globalization and terrorism as phenomena that are defined in a limited time and range, we tend to reach conclusions that are as ephemeral as newspapers. Thus, we will not be able to understand the meaning of these phenomena, their origin, their trajectory, and most importantly, their place in the larger scheme of things. We tend to ignore history. We are unable to put the pieces together and are constantly surprised that our short-term expectations are not met. My friends, this is our reality. We are constantly surprised that our expectations are not met. We should look at history and ask why. Hasn't this stopping transmission paradigm through a purely biomedical intervention in the individual body proved to be insufficient? We can find new magic bullets like post-exposure prophylaxis with single-dose rifampicin. And with a new magic bullet, an old paradigm is given new life. Despite the fact that no magic bullet can address the underlying social determinants of leprosy, such as lack of access to decent housing, clean water, among others. But what worries me the most is that such a paradigm was never built by those who experience leprosy in their bodies and lives. On the contrary, those who are affected by leprosy speak about dignity, healing and not just curing, post-cure and comprehensive care, rehabilitation, access to fundamental rights, including the right to have a voice and choice. But while a new life is given to an old paradigm, there are also signs of a possible scientific revolution on the horizon. At the turn of the century, the voices from the colonies had grown stronger, and people had self-organized. And a determined man began speaking about leprosy as a human rights issue at the highest level. This man recognized the deep knowledge of individuals affected by leprosy and refused to look at them as objects of compassion and redemption, but instead supported their path to self-determination. Yohei Sasakawa was in this sense a visionary, and I always feel that his bicycle metaphor is still to be fully comprehended. The organizations of persons affected by leprosy developed and multiplied. Some of them have direct access to their national governments nowadays, and theirs is a totally different narrative. They speak of the need for an open science, where scientists discuss on equal terms with persons affected by leprosy. They speak about rights enforcement. They speak about reparation. They speak about formal and material equality. They speak about people and not about a disease. And some of them speak not of leprosy, but of Hansen's disease. My friends, we are faced with a key choice that will define our place in history. Either we continue with a merely pharmaceuticalized approach and keep resorting to magic bullets that for 115 years have not been able to ensure neither well-being nor dignity, or we change the narrative and the interventions by putting people at the center with a rights-based approach to Hansen's disease. Together with the use of biomedicines technologies, we would pursue material equality and access to opportunities for persons affected by Hansen's disease on an equal basis with others. While the first approach is necessary, it is still a palliative. And while the second approach may be much more difficult to implement, it is the only final solution to the difficult to break bond between leprosy and social injustice. One day, future scholars will tell our story. Hopefully, they will be able to say that we changed an old and obsolete paradigm by replacing the disease with people at the center of our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your powerful speech. We are very much looking forward to learning from you at the Bergen Conference. Next, I would like to invite representatives from organizations of persons affected by Hansen disease to hear their thought on what's meaning that 150 years anniversary hold for the organization of persons affected by Hansen disease in addressing social issues associated with the disease. First, I would like to invite Purple Hope Initiative from Nigeria. Ms. Mary will make a video presentation.
Aha m bụ Mary Onyekachi site na Purple Hope Initiative Nigeria. Ọ bụ mụnwa bụ onye isi na ngalaba ụmụ nwanyị Abia steeti Nigeria. Ọrịa a bịara m mgbe m dị ntakịrị. Mgbe ahụ ebugharịchara m ụlọ ọgwụ niile. Ọ dịghị ebe a chọtara ihe na-eme m nọ. Ruo mgbe ọ bịaziekwa ya dị m ka na-efe ụkwụ m efe, ya bịa m n'aka, bịa m n'ụkwụ, abịa mata ihe ọ bụ. Mgbe ahụ ndị mmadụ ndị mara nụ ha anaghị ekwe erute m nso, ya mee m ma n'ịga ụlọ akwụkwọ m akpachapụ m. Mgbe ahụ anaghị ekwe m ka m sonye ndị ọzọ bịa n'ụlọ akwụkwọ, mbịa asị m lawa, ma na-ebe akwa sị gịnị kpatara eji asị m lawa. Anọgide ya na-eme m, ya bụrụ m ihe mwute ịkpachapụ m. Naanị mụ na ụmụnne m na-anọ bụ ndị na-erute m nso, ndị ọzọ anaghị erute m nso. Amaghị m na ọ bụ n'ihi ọnọdụ ọrịa mere. Emegide ruo mgbe abịa chọpụta na Uzuakọlị ka m nọ gaa praịmarị skuul m, ma nọdụkwa ebe ahụ site n'inye aka ndị German Leprosy, site n'aka Nkechi Cowell, ma bịa bụrụ onye bịa banye sekọndịrị skuul. N'ihi ọnọdụ akwa, mgbe m bịa bie na dọmetrị, n'ihi ọnya ewepụrụ m na dọmetrị, asị na ma ekwesịghị. So mgbe abịa kpachapụ m na dọmetrị, ya omezie m ịga ụlọ akwụkwọ ma bụrụ ihe shiri m ike, enwekwaghị m ike ịgapụcha ụlọ akwụkwọ. Abịa chọtara m ụlọ ebe m bi. Oge a m bi ebe ahụ na-agakwa, ụkwụ amalitekwe, onye nwe ụlọ asị m agwọchabeghị, ị ga-apụrụ m n'ụlọ, ma apụ akwa. Otu a ka m megidere ma bịa lọghachitekwe Uzuakọlị na 1993 ka m lọghachitere Uzuakọlị. Mgbe m lọghachitere Uzuakọlị n'ihi ọnya, ebe ahụ ka m nọzi bịa mụọ aka ọrụ a na-akpọ akwa ete. Mgbe m mụchara akwa ete ka m ji bịa lụọ di, ma bịa lụọ di ụkwụ ahụ nọkwa na-enyekwa nsogbu. Ime m agaghị m enwe ike ị na-esoro ndị ọzọ ma bịa biri na kọlọn. Ebe ahụ ka m nọ, ụkwụ ahụ bịa dị njọ, asị na mụ na onwe m ji ọnụ m sị na n'ihi na ahụla m na ụkwụ ahụ adịla njọ and alụọkwala m di obi amụta ụmụ, n'ihi na onweghị onye enyemaka. Masị na ọ bụrụ na m bugide onye a na ọ dịghị onye ga-enyere m aka ịzụ ụmụaka, masị ka egbuo m ụkwụ ahụ, abịa gbuo m ụkwụ ahụ. Anyị site n'igbu ụkwụ ahụ n'ihi mgbe ahụ ego asị m weta agaghị m enwe ike iwetefu ego ahụ ka e were nye aka ka egbuo m ụkwụ, agaghị m enwe ike iwetefu ego ahụ. Ihe omeme amalite mgbe ahụ na-achọ ụzọ m ga-esi ka enweta ego a ga-eji gbuo m ụkwụ ahụ. Si na enyemaka Chineke abịara ọfụta otu onye ya sị na ya gaghị enye m ego na n'ihi na ya nye m ego nke a na-eme na nrọ. Ya sị na ọ bụrụ na ya nye m ego na m ga-ịta ahụhụ karịa, kama na ya ga-ezi m ụzọ m ga-esi nweta ego ahụ. Ebe ahụ ka m nọ, mma m amalite ịgagharị na-arịọ arịrịọ ka enye aka ka ahụ ego a ga-eji gbuo m ụkwụ. Ofu nwoke nọnụ na bunu ES na edukeshọn bende ya sị na ya ga-ewere m ọrụ, na ọ bụrụ na ya were m ọrụ na ya bụ enyemaka ya ga-enyere m. Ebe ahụ ka m si, mgbe eji bịa wee m n'ọrụ ahụ, ebe ahụ ka m si nweta ego m ji kwụnyetụ iji nye aka, n'ihi na dọkịta sị na m ga-ewetatụ obere ego na nwoke na o zuru na ego a ga-eji gbuo ụkwụ ahụ, na m ga-ewetatụ obere ego. Ebe ahụ ka m nọzi nweta ego eji bịa gbuo m ụkwụ ma nọdụziekwa. Si mgbe ahụ, si enyemaka ọgwụ a, n'ihi na asị na ọ bụghị ọgwụ a ọ kara ịbụ na mbụ onye nwụrụnụ, n'ihi na ndị nwe m nọ, n'ihi amaghị m onye bụ mpa m, amaghị m onye ọ bụ, n'ihi enweghị mmadụ ha bụ obi na agaghị m abakwa uru ọzọ. Ma site na enyemaka ọgwụ a unu wepụtara ya, ememe abụziri onye nwere ike iguzoro ma ọ bụziri onye na-arụ bụrụ onye nwere ezinụlọ ilekọta ezinụlọ anya. Mana arịọkwasị ka unu nyetukwu aka, n'ihi nkwarụ a anyị nwe ma mụwa ma ndị anyị nwe na-eme ka anyị bụrụ ndị a na-akpachapụ ya, dịka gasị na agwọchabeghị anya. Mgbe anyị ga-apụ ma ọ na chọọchị ma ọ na ebe ọbụla, ha bịa hụ na otu anyị dị ma aka anyị ma ụkwụ ma ọnya, ha sị na agwọbeghị anya, ya bụrụ ihe mkpachapụ, ya bụrụ anyị ihe iru uju. Anyị na-asị ka unu nyetukwu aka ka ahụ na na-ewepụrụ ihe na-ebutenụ ọnya na mmerụ ahụ na ahụ inye mmadụ ntụpọ. Ọwụ mmadụ lee gị anya ya mara ise ịgwọ n'ihe dị otu a mere gị. Na Purple Hope Initiative, anyị na-arịọ arịrịọ sị ka enyere anyị aka ịkwado anyị n'ihe ọmụmụ dị iche iche ma ịrụ ụlọ, n'ihi na oge ụfọdụ anyị adịghị ala bụ na anyị enweghị ebe obibi anyị ga-ala. Ọ dịghị onye ga-ekwe isi ka anyị bịa n'ụlọ ya bịa biri. Ya mee anyị asịkwarị na ndị ọzọ na-ala Krismas, ya ume anyị na-anọ na kọlọnị Uzuakọlị Leprosy Center n'ihi enweghị ebe obibi anyị ga-ala. Anyị enweghị n'ebe obibi nke anyị n'obodo anyị. Ọ bụghị na anyị amaghị ebe anyị si bịa, ma n'ihi enweghị ụlọ, n'ihi enwekwana ihe enyemaka, n'ihi onye na-ala ọ ga-ekwado onwe ya. Anyị na-arịọ site na enyemaka ndị Purple Hope Initiative ka ha nyere anyị aka ịkwalite anyị, ime ka anyị nwere ihe anyị na-eme, ime ka anyị bụrụ ndị ga na-enwetakwanụ ihe site n'ịzụ anyị ọzụzụ dị iche iche, ma ọrụ aka ma ọkwa n'ịzụ ụmụ anyị n'ụlọ akwụkwọ. N'ihi na ọ bụ ụmụ anyị agaghị ụlọ akwụkwọ, ọ dịghị otu anyị ga-esi bilie, n'ihi na ọnwụ ụmụaka ahụ bụ ọdịnihu nke echi anyị. Ka anyị na-arịọ ka enyere anyị aka ma ebe ụmụ anyị nọ, ka ha bụrụ ka ha bara anyị uru, n'ihi na ọ bụrụ na ha bara anyị uru, ndị obodo ga-amatasị na anyị bụ mmadụ. Mgbe nwaanyị bilitere, ọsụsụ ụfọdụ ahụ ha na-asa anyị, ha ga-akwụsị ịsa anyị, n'ihi na ha hụtala na ụmụ anyị akpatala ihe. Ha ga-akwụsịtụ ị na-akpachapụ anyị iche. Ndị Sasakawa na enyemaka ha na-enye anyị site kemgbe 2001 ha malitere inyere anyị aka. Ma na-arịọkwa ka ike agwụkwala unu, ka unu gakwa n'ihu ị na-enyere anyị aka ma na ihe oriri dịka a na-enye ndị ọzọ, ka a na-echetakwa anyị nwa ndị bi na Leprosy Center Uzakole mana asị ka Chineke ya onye na-akwụghachi ka ọ kwụghachi unu mmaji n'ihi na apụghị ịkwụghachi unu ụgwọ ọrụ ihe niile unu na-emere anyị, ma Chineke onye ụgwọ ọrụ ya zuru oke, anyị sị ka ọ kwụghachi unu n'aha Jizọs, amen.
Thank you very much. Purple Hope Initiative will also join the conference and make a poster presentations. We will look forward to learning their best practice in Bergen. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Binti from PerMaTa, Indonesia. She will also make a visual presentation.
Hello everyone, let me introduce myself. I'm Binti Kofifa from Indonesia. I'm one of board member of PerMaTa Indonesia. In here I ask to talk about the reflection of 150 year celebration of discovery of Leprosy Bacillus in 1873. On medical treatment of leprosy, covers developing many new discovery included chemoprophylaxis. The chemoprophylaxis purpose to reduction of leprosy cases. We need to be grateful for that, but the struggle didn't finish because social problem has been there. In Indonesia, has highest number of people with disability in Southeast Asia. The primary causes leading to function impairment being disease included leprosy, number 2, and an accident 76%, and number 3 a congenital factor 17% cases. Leprosy has a big impact even after people who have had leprosy recovered from the disease. Stigma can affect all elements of the person's life, which included health, education, social, livelihood aspect, and accessibility aspect. Despite any program are improved, but there are still many gaps and barriers happen on the fulfillment of the rights of the people with disability, especially in the rural or remote area. Based on the last project, many people affected by leprosy were folks who have rejected discrimination and neglected from their family, their community, and their local authorities. They have not identity document like ID card, health insurance, social protection, accessibility, access to education, access to entertainment, access to merit, and other access. So their rights cannot to fulfillment. According to National Human Rights Commission, people affected by leprosy just a little progress year by year because generally they have been live in the leprosy colonies. Some people affected by leprosy, there are live in the community, but with less education, life in poor area, and sometimes life in dirty environment. So there are the vulnerable group. Indonesia have many members, but didn't all could organize yet. So some region still have been difficult for doing advocacy, like entity like East Java and other region. One of good organized of PerMaTa Indonesia is PerMaTa of South Sulawesi. We know many perspectives from people affected by leprosy in leprosy program. Some people more like program about empowerment, advocacy, something improve education like training, scholarship, and other. But other group like program of economic oriented, and I think this is not belongs to because every people have different need. Besides that, less skill of people affected by leprosy made part of treat on the PerMaTa. But PerMaTa has good strengths. Example, PerMaTa is one of organization people affected by leprosy in Indonesia, and the organization is already known by government or community organization. There are organizations like PerMaTa, but not too much, not from affected by leprosy, and not from grassroots, usually from foundation. There are care about leprosy, so there are together made foundation for supporting leprosy program in Indonesia. Stigma and discrimination of leprosy in Indonesia still have been. Usually, all this generation still has strong stigma than young generation. I think a young generation more open-minded than old generation. Stigma and discrimination in Indonesia, especially in at Cineponto, example, people affected by leprosy has been divorced because leprosy has been stopped from school because leprosy has been isolated life because the leprosy and other discrimination. This condition become weaknessly for people affected by leprosy to participate in the community. According this condition, in my opinion, participation people affected by leprosy on stigma and discrimination reduction is an important, very important, especially the struggle by organization, so their voice are heard. I think in this era, everything we do must based on the data. So my advice: give the people affected by leprosy a skill of participatory research more and more because with that the people affected by leprosy can working collecting the data for based on the advocacy. My closing statement: if the people affected by leprosy talking about themselves, so the world will learn because they have good experience about it, about leprosy by themselves. Thank you very much, and see you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Binti. Now I would like to move on the Q&A sessions. We have received many questions to Mr. Sasakawa. This session will be moderated by Professor Taka Nandi. Professor Taka, floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the many people to share the questions to be asked by the the Goodwill Ambassador. So due to the limitation of our time, as we usually do, previously we have selected the 3 persons to ask a question to Goodwill Ambassador. So let me start. The first, I want to invite Mr. Paul from Bangladesh. Mr. Paul, can you hear me? Mr. Paul?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, you're there. So before you ask a question to the Goodwill Ambassador, please briefly introduce yourself and also identify the organization you belong to. So floor is yours, Mr. Paul.
Thank you, sir. I'm Wadijwan Tulu. I'm working for Lepra Bangladesh and Bogra Federation. Actually, Bogra Federation is organization, people's organization with the person affected by leprosy. They are working since 2011 with the support of Sasakawa Health Foundation. They are very much happy to get this opportunity. Directly, I like to go to our question because the networking is very problem is there. So thanks again to Sasakawa Health Foundation to arranging this great event, and we are very much happy to participate, attend there. So on behalf of Bogra Federation, I would like to say Mr. Sasakawa sir, Yohei Sasakawa sir. Most of persons affected by leprosy in Bangladesh are poor and have to work every day to eat and suffer stigma and discrimination. Therefore, many people affected by leprosy are unable to raise their voice. In that case, asking to Yohei Sasakawa sir on behalf of Bogra Federation, how can they regain their independence and a life of dignity? This is the question from Bogra Federation. I'd like. Thank you, sir.
Paul-san,
Mr. Paul, good evening. I think it was 4 years ago, I was able to meet with the Prime Minister Hashina when we hosted the international conference in your country. Her Excellency had came to our conference. And I think that you were there in that conference as well. Actually, we wanted to host or conduct the leprosy elimination activity in your country, and also to host another conference in order to talk about the people affected by leprosy, but it has been delayed. And it seems like in your country, there's going to be a presidential election. Therefore, I think that the meeting timing may slide further back. But I'm looking forward to see you in person once again.
今はそういうことで私たちはバングラデシュの
So what's happening right now is that
生活向上
in order to raise the level of standard of life for the people in Bangladesh, and at the same time, we would need to further reinforce the activities for the awareness on leprosy in your country. And Mr. Paul, I think that you are already taking the leadership in Bangladesh, and you already have a solid foundation for this persons affected by leprosy organization. I think that it is very important to further reinforce this organization formed by leprosy persons affected by leprosy. I think this is going to be the first step. The reason why I say this is because that one person alone would not be able to make best out from the effort. But what happens if there are 10 people, or if there are 100 people, or let's say if there are 1,000 of such people? I think that the group would become further stronger and become more influential. Therefore, for the people suffering from leprosy, I think that it's important that such people to be engaged in your organization so that you would have more number of people to further for that the organization to grow. May I further speak? And once the organization grows bigger, in that case, even for the people suffering from their lives, they would be able to speak to the Ministry of Social Affairs as well. For example, citing example from India, what happens in India is that they have a strong organization of persons affected by leprosy, and therefore they are able to talk to the Ministry of Social Welfare and be able to do a negotiation with the ministerial level. And if in case that negotiation doesn't go well, I am willing to visit the country and would like to meet with the Minister of Social Justice and ask them to bring subsidy to the persons affected by leprosy for the betterment of their life. So first and foremost, the importance is to further make your organization stronger, have more persons affected by leprosy as the members of your organization. And Sasakawa Health Foundation is willing to help you to achieve that. And for the persons who have developed disability as a result from leprosy, or the persons who have disability as a result from accident, disability is the same, regardless of what their origins might be. Because as was already determined by the United Nations, people who have disability have the equal rights with others, so long as they are the member of the society. Therefore, I would like all the people who have developed the disability to be able to feel confident living in the society as rest of the members of the society. And for that, I would like to count on you, Mr. Paul, to achieve that objective. And we would be beside you as well. And if you have any problems or any situations where you need to consult with someone, please do rely on us so that as many people as possible who are suffering from leprosy would be able to be encouraged and be able to have the job for them to be able to live their own life. So let's bring that kind of society together.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sasakawa.
Also,
Yes, Mr. Paul.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
No more
あ
comments.
バングラでお目にかかることを楽しみにしてますね。
I would look forward to seeing you in Bangladesh soon.
Thank you, sir. You're most welcome. You're most welcome, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Porter. I'm sure Mr. Sasakawa is going to visit
Thank you.
Bangladesh in the near future. So next, I want to invite another speaker from India, Mr. Sailendra Prasad. Mr. Sailendra, can you hear me?
Yes, I am here.
Okay,
Hey.
nice to meet you again.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
So,
much.
Mr. Sailendra, as Mr. Paul did, please introduce yourself briefly and also identify the organization you belong to before
Yes, yes.
asking the question to the Goodwill Ambassador. Please.
First of all, so very warm greetings from the people affected by leprosy, India. We are from affected people organizations. We run an organization called Atma Shabhiman. That's affected people's organizations. And especially the youth of the colonies. In Jharkhand, so there are 56 leprosy colonies, and especially the youth are much associated. And I too like to work with the youth of the colonies to build the capacity of the colonies' youths and work with them. I am very much interested to working and changing the environment of the colony, especially the stigma and discrimination. That's presently it's very less, but we have to remove the stigma and the discrimination from the colony. My question to Sasakawa-san is, many people affected by leprosy are aware of their rights, but lack of courage to fight for that. How can their confidence and courage be increased, as we need young people to work together for people affected by leprosy in the colonies? But many young people in the colonies do not want to do so. How can we increase the number of young people working together? What are your views on this? This is my question related to the youth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sailendra.
Sailendraさん、Namaste.
Hello.
Namaste.
Mr. Sailendra,
Yeah, namaste.
well, thank you very much for such a great question, Mr. Sailendra. For the past 20-some years or so, I have created the organization called APAL, which is for the persons affected by leprosy. And there are state leader, I think, in Jharkhand as well. Sorry, I do not have the name of the person out of my mind right now. But one thing that I can say to your question is to maybe talk to those APAL organization. We have started from Bihar and went to other states as well, together with the APAL people, so that we would be able to meet with the state ministers of those different regions and meet with Minister of Health so that we can levy towards the ministries in order to raise the special allowance. In some cases, we were able to bring that up to 2,000 rupees. And so when it comes to the organization of persons affected by leprosy, they would be able to access to the state ministers as well as Ministry of Health. So that was the kind of the activity that I have done in India. So in Jharkhand, for example, if you, Mr. Sailendra, and also your colleague were not able to talk to, say, the state minister or Ministry of Health people, then please let me know so that I would visit you, and then we can visit to those ministers together, or maybe to meet with the state minister of Jharkhand together so that we can talk to them. And in India, there is an organization called India Sasakawa Leprosy Foundation. And in many colonies, this SILF is supporting the people in the colonies to be able to have them get more confidence and be able to live independently. And we provide various programs for that. Personally, at this point, I do not have the material in front of me, therefore I don't know which colonies that they are active in your state. However, if in case you have this kind of need, for example, in your colonies, please do let us know. One of the examples is, for example, to purchase liksha and then use that for business, or say own goats and then want to sell the milk from the goat, or for example, want to raise chicken and then want to sell their eggs. And this is the kind of the means that we can provide so that the people living in the colonies can live self-sufficiently. And the money that they receive will be kept for that own colony for the betterment of the living conditions. So if there's anything that you are in need of from the colonies that you're responsible for, then please do write us an email or letter so that I can connect you to the Sasakawa India Leprosy Foundation. And in many places in India, there are many people who succeed in doing businesses as a result from the money that we provide. And there are quite a number of young people as well. And I think that those young people have jobs. And if there's anyone who doesn't have the job, then I would like you to talk to those people and then ask their needs as to what kind of work that they want to do. And depending on that, we might be able to help them to acquire whatever skill they need. And what we want is that the persons affected by leprosy organization in India to become the most powerful organization in the world. As I have been saying, that the persons affected by leprosy themselves represents the colony. And we want to see the time in which those people would be able to meet directly to the Minister of Health or to the state minister. And indeed, they've already been able to do that. So going forward, it's all about how their life would be able to be improved in colonies, and how could children be able to access to education or improve the level of education. So that's something that we're always giving thought seriously as we speak. And we already have some scholarship programs for those children as well. So I would like you to contact people from APAL, and if in case you have difficulty accessing them, then please do write to the Sasakawa Health Foundation. We can think with you together so that we can solve the problem that you're faced with.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sasakawa. Mr. Sailendra, do you want to share your reflections with Mr. Sasakawa?
Yeah, I too believe that if the education increases, the capacity of the youth increases. I too believe in that. And I happy to share that last year on the December, we got a chance to do a survey in the 360 villages in the district of Devghar, Jharkhand, where 68 new cases as found, and 30 colony youths. I have used their 30 colonies used are done the survey there with the help of WHO, WHO and National Leprosy Elimination programs, and 68 new cases we found there. That message I want to say then.
ございます。これは本当に今。
Thank you very much for doing that. I was about to touch upon that point as well. But since you have mentioned, Mr. Sailendra, when it comes to persons affected by leprosy, one of the important part is those people to find new cases. And I do know that people are putting an utmost effort finding new patients in India. Prime Minister Modi have already announced a target of zero leprosy by year 2030. And I think that the central role is being played by you and also members of the colonies. And I know that they are quite proactive in order to support this objective that are set forth by the Prime Minister. And I'm so grateful for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Sasakawa.
you very much. Once again, I am inviting Mr. Sasakawa-san to Jharkhand. Come to Jharkhand again.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sailendra.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So next, I want to invite Mr. Faustino Pinto from Brazil. Faustino, are you there?
I'm here too.
Yes, you're here. So Faustino.
Hi, my name is Faustino. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Faustino. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Faustino Pinto. I'm from Wuhan, the movement for the reintegration of persons affected by Hansen's disease. Despite I wake up a lot of pain and back pain, I'm very happy to be here and appreciate that for inviting me. Mr. Yohei Sasakawa is same t-shirt, the different colors. I have three questions for Mr. Yohei Sasakawa. People affected by Hansen's disease in Brazil suffer stigma and discrimination, but manage to live hard every day. What can be done to improve the lives of people affected by Hansen's disease? How can we further influence governments? What's your vision for the future of the lives of people affected by Hansen's disease? Yeah, three questions in one.
I remember meeting you, Mr. Faustino. It's not a first time, right?
Right.
As you know, when it comes to the activities by Mohan, it's one of the most powerful organizations in the world. And I know that. And at the same time, you now have a new president. President Lula is now in office. I think President Lula has a great interest towards leprosy or Hansen's disease. And at the same time, our tool is now part of the government organization And I'm sure that he's going to play a very important role on the Hansen's disease. And I'm also contacting President Lula so that we would be able to host the international conference for the organizations of leprosy affected people. And we have been requesting to the president that we want to host this president at a sooner time possible. But as you know, when it comes to President Lula, he has a deep understanding on Hansen's disease, as you may know as well. And therefore, having your strong organization and our tool now becoming part of the government's organization, I'm sure that this is one of the encouraging moments for the persons affected by leprosy. And I think that the budget might be able to be brought in for the betterment of the persons living in the colonies. In case of India, that kind of situation is already being achieved and it's had already started. And so I'm sure that President Lula is going to formulate the policies as such for the sake of the persons affected by leprosy, so that President Lula would be able to bring the budget to be able to be distributed to the colonies so that they can live a better life. So we are ready at all time to fly to Brazil in doing this conference. And another thing that I would like to mention to you is that we held the conference in Vatican, and I know Morhan was present there as well, and we were able to have you meet with His Holiness the Pope. Especially, the Pope is from Argentina, and there are quite a number of Christian people in Brazil. And I want as many people in Brazil to elevate their life standard. And I think His Holiness the Pope himself wants them to live with no discrimination nor stigma. And I have actually seen His Holiness, also his prayer was also being sent over to Morhan people as well. So having his power in place, I think this would help the people of Brazil and suffering from Hansen's disease as well. Unfortunately, there are still a number of people who have developed disability as a result from Hansen's disease. But there is a Universal Declaration of Rights that also encompasses disability as well. Therefore, the disability developed as a result from Hansen's disease is treated equally as other people who had disability, for example, as a result from an accident. And this is the kind of inclusive society that we need to aim for. And I think that this is going to be one of the momentum that the world is faced with. And I think that Brazil shall be the forefront of that movement. And I think Morhan would have a big role to play there.
Thank you, Mr. Sasakawa. I'm very happy to my new president, and I asked the same question for him. the three questions is very important to ask to him.
Thank you very much, Mr.
機会を
Sasakawa.
ブラジルでお目にかかりましょ
So I will see you soon in your country, in Brazil.
Thank you.
Thank you, Faustino.
Bye-bye.
う。Oh.
Faustino, I have one question to you. The t-shirts Mr. Sasakawa is wearing, which one do you like, yours or Mr. Sasakawa's t-shirts? Which one do you like?
Oh, my vision, no close.
You know, Faustino, you're coming to Bergen, as far as I know.
Okay.
So we are going to bring.
Don't forget Hansen disease. Yes.
Yes, same as you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Sasakawa.
So we are going to bring many T-shirts, the same T-shirts with Mr. Sasakawa in Bergen. So if you like it, you know, we can give it to you.
Oh, wow, good.
You can take a picture with Mr. Sasakawa there. So thank you very much, Faustino.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Obrigado.
De nada. You're welcome. De nada.
So I think the time is running out. So before we close, I want to invite Mr. Sasakawa. Mr. Sasakawa, do you want to share your final remarks about today's session?
ありがとうございます。素晴らしい
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a wonderful webinar that we were able to do tonight. And since COVID pandemic hit the world, this kind of Zoom is still very effective because we were able to reach to as many people around the world. So we would like to keep on leveraging this technology and host this webinar so that we all can share the same challenges and problems that we're faced with so that we can overcome that with the support of everyone. You are not alone contemplating with all these challenges and problems. I think that it is important that all the persons affected by leprosy to be united. And that's going to be a powerful message, not only in your country, but to the world as well. Therefore, we would like to utilize this webinar going forward so that all of us can be united and work towards the same objective. So I would like you to continue with this kind of webinar as well. And I would want as many people as possible to join this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sasakawa. I also appreciate the three persons to raise a question to Mr. Sasakawa. So unfortunately, the time is running out, so I want to close the session. So I want to pass the mic to Chikako.
Thank you very much for joining us today. The Bergen International Conference on Hansen disease will take place on June 21st and 2nd. The conference can also be online, and we look forward to your registrations. See you next week and have a good day.